Filipino from Negros. um, I got my start in music because I'm Filipino. Um, it's just, part of who we are, I think, in a lot of ways. But also, I came from a very musical family on my mother's side as well. Um, both my grandparents musicians. Like my mom played trombone, my uncle played clarinet, saxophone. So from a very early age, um, I was singing and dancing and carrying on, and yeah, it kind of has been part of who I am always. And when I was younger, I also used to draw a lot and tell stories and just had a pretty wild imagination. And I think that has also carried through as part of who I am, and a lot of what I do as an artist, as a musician, as a songwriter is I'm a storyteller. And as I've gotten older, I've kind of realized that a huge part of that is being a cultural practitioner as well. And I think as songwriters, or obviously, like a lot of what we write about is observational, or it's about the way that you interact with the world. And I guess for me, a lot of that has always had to do with identity, like either as a queer person or as a brown person, kind of generally, or as a Wiradjuri person or a Filipino person. I think that those sort of things inform how I interact with the world, and so inevitably that's come out a lot through my songwriting. And so that's a little bit about who I am and what I do.
Amazing. And Jim, you are the head of program at the Arts Wellbeing Collective. I believe that's been running since 2017. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
How had you kind of got your start there?
I actually started as a graphic designer, and my first connection with the music industry was designing band and rave flyers. And then I increasingly got interested in the social justice nexus with creative industries and the arts generally, and how the arts can inspire people to join causes and make that next move. I kind of accidentally fell into venue management, and then that started a whole career in arts management more broadly. I'm not necessarily a fan of specification. So I've worked across theatre, literature, music, visual arts, and for a number of years I worked for the Victorian Health Promotion Foundation in that area where art and health meet. Vic Health was one of the first funders for the Arts Wellbeing Collective. And then after the pandemic and seeing the impact that had on so many of my creative friends, I was looking for an opportunity that was more focused on the welfare of creatives themselves, rather than the input that arts could have on broader community health. I'm still really passionate about that, don't get me wrong. But yeah, so Arts Wellbeing Collective started in 2017. I've been with the organisation for 2 years.
Amazing. And I guess the second question I want to ask, specifically to you both, Mojo and Eilish, you've both been in your music careers for over like 10 years releasing music. What do you think some of the key elements are to sustaining yourself as an artist? I'll start with you, Eilish.
Okay. Well, I think sustainability is like a many-pronged beast. You might be financially stable, but you might be emotionally unstable, or vice versa, or both unstable, which a lot of artists will probably relate to. Did you ask, like, how did you maintain sustainability?
Yeah,
or,
well,
like,
just what were kind of the things that you found as you started off as, like, throughout your career, what kind of helped you continue through releasing music?
Well, I think something that really stuck with me, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said it, someone famous said that unless you literally can't think of doing anything else with your life, do not pursue a creative career. If you can be attracted to in some way, shape or form, like being a lawyer or like being a plumber or like being something that has like you know, not easier, obviously, life is difficult, but like a more straightforward trajectory, do that. Because if you wouldn't literally die to do this, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So I think that was like the biggest thing that drove me through, you know, being a 6-year-old starting to play piano to like today. That's always been my mantra. It's like continually asking myself like, okay, am I still willing to die for this? Because if not, like it's time to stop, because this is really hard. And I won't lie, it's been really hard. And despite, even though having that desire, it still makes it very difficult. So yeah, I had no tools at the beginning of my career. All I had was a family that were very supportive and some friends who were in the same boat. You start this career as like a video game player who hasn't like, you know, found any loot yet, you know? And then over the years you develop a thicker skin, you get the tools that you need. And, you know, I'm still picking up tools, obviously. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's helpful, but I think it's a good question to ask yourself continually. Would you still die for this? Because if not, give it up, you know?
Amazing. Emoji?
I think that, you know, as harsh as it probably sounds, Eilish is not wrong. It is a really incredibly tough industry, and it's an incredibly difficult thing to continually commit yourself to. And, you know, if I'm being totally honest, it's probably more like 20 years plus.
My apologies.
No, that's okay. I've been in the music industry doing different things, different projects for over 20 years, and I, you know, have had a solo career now for about 12 years, maybe a little bit longer. I've been releasing music as a solo artist, and I have burnt out repeatedly. And to be totally honest, in recent times I've kind of been grappling with the idea that maybe I've reached a bigger kind of burnout than I've experienced before, and the reality of that is me finding other ways to make art that aren't... See, the big thing for me is that I've had a career in music, so my art making has been tied to my making a living, and that's a really different thing to being... You know, we kind of have this perception that to succeed as an artist means that you have to make your living 100% from doing your art. And suddenly, I feel like everything changed for me when I hit 40. And then I went, wow, I've done the things. Like, I've hit all these milestones, you know, like, I've won awards and industry accolades, and I've received grants and music prizes and all these, and I've played all over the world, and I've played in stadiums, and I've done all these crazy things that I had set out to do, and never once did I stop and take stock of that. I was always looking at the next thing, but if I lose this momentum, you know, like I've got to, you know, like I don't have time to stop and just appreciate what I've achieved. I have to keep chasing the next thing, or else this is going to disappear. And I don't know, I sort of, right before we went into a pandemic, I had played in the 18 months prior. I had played over 200 shows in 5 different countries. And like literally, I'll give you an example of what my kind of schedule looked like. This is all the opposite of what I want you guys to like take away. But this is what I was doing to myself. So like there was this one week where I did, I think it was like a Friday we played at Port Fairy, and then we drove on the Saturday morning back to Melbourne and got on a flight and flew to Tasmania and played at Panama Festival in Launceston, and then we drove straight back to our hotel and got on. We slept for a couple of hours, got up really early in the morning, sun hadn't come up, got on a flight, flew to Adelaide, played at WOMAD. We stayed and watched a whole bunch of bands and then went home, had a shower, got our bags and went to the airport and flew from Adelaide to Brisbane, and then from Brisbane to LA, and then from LA to Austin, and then played our first show at South by Southwest 4 hours after we landed. Then we played 7 shows in 5 days, flew back to LA, had one show in LA, and then flew back to Melbourne and played in Melbourne the night we landed. And I was self-managed through all of this. So I was the one making these decisions, and they were bad decisions. I felt like I had to do this. And you know, and things, we came out of it. Like, we got signed to Paradigm Agency in LA, and I was working with Tom Windish, who, you know, is a really renowned agent. He, you know, he looks after like Hot Chip and Wolfpack and Billie Eilish, and so he was like, he saw us at South by and signed us. And then, you know, what happened next was, like, I got sick. I was doing a stadium tour with the Hilltop Hoods, and then I was meant to go and do another 30 dates or something in Europe with them, and I was literally playing Fridays and Saturdays around the country in stadiums, and then on Sundays coming home, falling in a heap, and on Mondays I was going to the hospital to get MRIs and CAT scans because I had a cancer scare. And it was burnout. It was like a physical burnout. I had to pull myself off a European tour that was like a really big deal. And right when I give myself 3 months, and then I'm coming back. And we were meant to play a show with Lil Nas and Miley Cyrus. And on the Wednesday before the show, I got a phone call going, they can't get into the country because there's this thing called the coronavirus. And so I went, okay. So I get a little bit more time off. And that turned into like 3 years of time off. And then going back, I was like, wow. After that, I was like, I actually can't go back to that life anymore. I got all this perspective, and I realized that the things that were fruitful for me, the things that actually gave me joy, were no longer chasing that thing. And that, for a really long time, for like 20 years, that was my thing. And I loved it. And I wouldn't take back like all the fun experiences that I had and all of that. But when you know that that's... And so for me, the thing that really... there was like a huge shift for me was realizing like my love for making music had diminished because of how hard I was grinding myself. So I need to like pull myself back from that and fall in love with making music again, because if I'm faking it, like that's doing me a disservice, it's doing my art a disservice, it's doing my audience a disservice. That said, I made the best album I've ever made during the lockdown because I fell in love with it again. And I had all this time to make music, and there was no pressure to be out on the road. Yeah, right? And it's the best record I've ever made. And you know, and I can say that with all sincerity. It's like, because I let myself have the time and the space, and as an artist, like if that's why if you are doing it just because you like the idea of like, I don't know, the celebrity or the, you know, the fame or the this and that, is the wrong reason. I don't think that I mean, sure, there's like some that I think there is like a market for people that just kind of come and go, but that you got to know that's like a quick burn. If you're in it for the long burn, if you're in it because you love music, you got to let yourself have time and space to actually incubate ideas, to love what you're doing, and you have to take stock of it while you're in it. So don't rush through the studio part. Don't rush through the writing part. You know, if you like touring, have fun with touring, but also know that, like, for me now, touring doesn't look the same as it did when I was in my 20s. Touring is not playing shows and then partying all night. Touring is actually an exercise in self-care. It's like Tai Chi before I walk on stage, Tai Chi when I come off stage. I literally will do everything to preserve my voice. Night in, night out singing, I gotta drink water, I gotta sleep, I don't drink alcohol, I don't smoke, I don't stay up all night talking. I go back to my hotel room and I sleep. And so that, I guess that was a really long-winded way of saying I did everything wrong. I learnt the hard way. Now I have all these things in place to make that sustainable for me long term. It might look different for you, but those are the things that you have to look after your health, physical and mental. And you have to, you have to commit yourself to your art first and foremost. Like that should be you should be in love with it. If you're not loving it, then you need to take time off. And that's okay. And it also doesn't have to be the thing that sustains you financially. If that is the hard thing, just make sure that you love it first. I really, really, really truly mean that. For years I thought that I had to make my living only from doing that. And I mean, I still do primarily, but like I also do a lot of mentoring and that kind of thing, and that kind of sustains me as well. And it also re-energizes me because I'm connecting with other people who love their art as well. And the community around you when you're doing that will carry you a long way. It's not a competition. And too many people have, I guess, treat it like it is. This industry is getting harder and harder all the time. So just, that's probably another big one for me. So take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, but also take care of yourself socially.
Definitely. That's such an important answer. Thank you, Mojo, on like burnout. And I think I want to direct my next question, I guess related to that, the struggles that you face as an artist. And Jim, I wanted to ask what you've seen with people coming through the Arts Wellbeing Collective, perhaps the struggles that they've faced, including burnout or creative burnout even. How does the collective help with these, and what's the advice that you bring?
Yeah, thanks. That was almost a rehearsed segue from Moju, but we didn't, promise. So Arts Wellbeing Collective focuses very much on mental health, and there are some horrific statistics for people that work in their creative industries regarding their mental health. So an organisation we work really closely with called Support Act, which you may have heard of. They run a survey every couple of years asking people that work in music, but also the broader creative industries, how their mental health is. Their most recent survey was launched, the results were launched about 2 months ago. People that work in the creative industries, not just creatives, but people that work in administrative roles, back of house, marketing, have 53.5% say that they have either high or very high psychological distress. In the general population, that's 15%. So there are a range of factors that cause that. Like working in the arts and in music is almost a perfect storm for poor mental health. You have late nights, loud noises, you're often separated from your loved ones for long periods, shitty food, hard to sleep. So we create a bunch of different resources. Some of them are PDF written downloadable documents. Others are videos, others are audio files. They're all available on our website for free. They discuss topics like how to sleep. Because if you're working late at night, you're working to a different timetable than the rest of the world. So how to make sure that you're eating well for performance. We have specific resources that deal with festivals and with touring. We also have resources that are directed toward managers that work in the industries, not just the artists themselves. So the managers are the ones that are often making the really consequential decisions that are affecting the mental health of the creatives and all the other staff. So managers have a legal obligation to look after the psychological health of their staff. We supply them the tools. They know how to produce acts, or they know how to produce festivals, but when they put their mind to making sure that everybody is mentally healthy, they don't even know where to start. So we provide the tools for both the managers, the creatives, and everybody else that works in the industry. We run training courses. There are fee-for-service training courses. Most of those are geared toward managers, but we welcome creatives to attend. Moju's reference to both physical and mental health, like we're all trained to look after our physical health because we know that at some point we're going to catch a cold or we're going to be reliant on how physically healthy we are. It's the same with mental health. Unless you know the core principles of self-care, it's going to catch you. Like you're going to burn out. You're going to flip out with imposter syndrome and self-doubt. So there are tools that you can put in place to protect yourself and to do checks regularly. For those that are starting out, one of our most pertinent resources we launched early this year, which is called Navigate Well. And it's really good for people that are starting their career. But the feedback that we've got is it's also good for people that are years into their career to do a review, to look at how their values might have changed, what different parts of their life they want to put more emphasis on, and to do some mapping, to take some time to really interrogate your life motives and what you want from your career. Obviously, I'm a lot older than many of you are. I've known jazz singers who later in life became children's entertainers just because their priorities changed entirely. And they reinvented their careers and in some instances have had more success in their reinvented careers than their initial careers. We do work with Support Act quite closely. They run a hotline, a mental health hotline, which is a 1-800 number that I don't have with me at the moment, but you can find it on their website. It's staffed 24/7. People, because work is different in our industry, you don't need to be working in the normie version of work. If you need to talk to somebody, you can call them. You can get 12 counselling sessions. They can provide a whole lot of tips. There are plenty of tools out there for people. If you need it, I would advise making yourself familiar with those tools as soon as you can.
I like that you mentioned Support Act because I'm actually mentioning them in this question now. As they released a survey as well this year, as they interviewed the music industry in Australia, finding that 68% of all respondents said cost of living was one of their biggest challenges working in the music industry sector. With a fifth of respondents' annual income being under the poverty line, it was 19% of respondents. I guess related to that, we were talking about having like side hustles, I guess, like alongside our music careers. Eilish, I want to ask you, alongside your career, you keep yourself very busy as a director at Starcross PR, also as a writer, a singer producer at Shameless Media. How did you get started in these roles, and how do you juggle it alongside your music career?
Well, the reason I started doing things outside of music in order to make money was because I needed money to do music. It was like, a very simple equation in my mind. And because I had a little too much pride, I wanted to be able to tell myself, and probably to tell others, if I'm perfectly honest, that I was sustaining myself with music. So in order to do such a thing, I needed to be working in music. So what did I do? A long time ago, when I was 21, I got an internship with a local PR company called On The Map PR, who are fabulous publicists over there. And I learned everything I needed to know about music PR from Emily Chung, who leads that company. And gradually I worked my way up from being an intern who taught 6-year-olds piano on the side to being a full-time employee with Emily. And then my music career took off, so I did that exclusively for a while. And then, what happened then? And then COVID happened, and everything went, down the drain, obviously. And I decided that I knew enough about music publicity at that point that I felt that there was room for a small artist-led company that focused on a modular approach to music PR, which essentially, in my definition, means you can kind of pick and choose which packages you put together. They're all, not all of them are like super accessible to the indie musician, but a lot of them are. And a lot of it is focused on giving indie musicians the tools to run their own PR campaign. So I started Starcross PR with that in mind just after COVID as a way to kind of improve the industry that I think needed improvement in that particular area. I saw a lot of people employing publicists and spending their hard-earned cash on publicists and not knowing what the publicist actually did. And I think that was really upsetting. So I started that as a way to improve my community and also make money. And also at this time, I also started writing because I needed something that wasn't music. At that point, I had been working on my music career since I was 18. I was about to turn 30, and I was kind of over it, to be honest. Like, I was so sick of spending all my literally, you guys would understand. Money in would go straight out into music, hemorrhaging money into a music career that was, a music industry that was decimated by COVID and, bottlenecked into very difficult ways to kind of break through and blah, blah, blah. So I started writing. And a lot of my writing was focused on the problems in the music industry, quite honestly. Then I started interviewing artists, and then I started thinking about pop culture, and then, it kind of one thing led to another. So I've always had 5 income streams, which is an absolute nightmare at tax time. But I think the great thing about writing is that it was a way for me to tap into my creativity and to, wax lyrical about things that I cared about, but it wasn't music. And I think my relationship with music over the years has been this torrid love affair where I'm like, oh no, I simply couldn't do anything else, because if I don't do that, then who am I, You're still you, I guess. If you ever have that question where you're like, oh, maybe I want to try doing this actually. Maybe I want to try writing, or maybe I'm interested in pottery or, whatever. You're still you if you let go of that. In fact, you're probably going to be more you if you let go of that clench on music. So yeah, I guess all of this was kind of wrapped up in a way that I approached the sustainability of my music career, because if I had kept going down like the stubborn, hard-headed Taurus that I am, if I had held on to that prideful idea of, no, I am digging my heels in, I will only make money from music and I will only make money if I release a single and it goes really well, I would have hated music by this time in my life. I would have hated it. I would have had no money. I would have still been living with my parents. And I mean, it's not like I'm rolling in riches now, but I'm a lot happier, which I think is, you know, the important thing ultimately. Yeah, I think I don't want you to walk away from this with like a negative view on the music industry, although there are a lot of things to be feeling negative about. I want you to kind of feel empowered to navigate a very difficult world, because all of the tools that you need to have a sustainable career in this industry, you already have, or / are accessible to you. Yeah, I guess that's all. You just need to be adaptable. That's it.
Definitely, thank you. I appreciate that answer. And it's definitely, something that's important alongside a music career. And Moju, did you have anything you want to add kind of on having that side hustle alongside your music career?
Look, I've been really enjoying hearing what Eilish has to say about it, because I agree with so much of what you say. My experience has been a little different, where I haven't so much had side hustles, but like I have allowed myself to explore my creativity in other ways. I guess this is what I was trying to get at before, but I just gave the most ADHD answer I could possibly give in my last response. So many tangents all happening at once. Music has been essentially my sole income. I've formed a company. So under that umbrella, I can kind of do things that are adjacent to music, like mentoring, or like, you know, I've done a lot of guest speaking at, you know, call arts and things like that. So I'm speaking about my experience, just as I am today, you know, speaking about my experience in the music industry, or you know, talking about songwriting, or mentoring, you know, emerging artists sort of one-on-one. So I've done a lot of that, which kind of, falls under the umbrella of, you know, my music career and what I do. But for me, it's more about finding other ways to be creative that aren't tied to earning a living. So for me, it's like I am like an avid photography enthusiast, you know, like I take a lot of photos. I'm always fiddling around with cameras and spending a lot of money and time doing that, or you know, like, again, like so ADHD, like raging ADHD. So I'm like, one week I'm really interested in pottery, and I do that for a week, or like I'm really interested in something over here, and I'll do that. And for me, that's really fun and exciting, and I can do all these other things. And you know, my identity, so much of my identity has been tied up in music, and I think, you know, I've finally reached that point where I'm like, oh, actually, you know, I'm a parent, and I'm a you know, like there's all these other things that are huge parts of my identity that have nothing to do with how I make a living. And I think, you know, because we live in such a capitalist society, we're like really in the thick of that end stage capitalism. It's like we have been conditioned for so long to think that you know, how you make your money is the most important part of who you are. And whilst making music, you know, I've been through so many different phases with it where it has been my number one passion, and then there's been times where it's like, this is not really my passion right now, but it is also the career that I have, and I respect that, and it is my job, and I turn up to work and I do the best job that I can possibly do. There are times where I've walked into writing rooms where I'm like, I don't really feel like writing a song today, but it's my job to write a song. And you get to a point, which I think is really important too to talk about if you're songwriters, is that you don't just wait around for inspiration to come. I think when I was younger, I thought that's how it worked, but actually you do acquire all these tools, and you learn how to turn your creativity on and off like a switch, and do your job when you're, required to do that job. And or whether that's writing music, or if it's going on stage. There's been days where I'm like, I'm in a bad mood, I don't want to go on stage, but then I walk on stage and all of that falls away. I completely forget about the day that I was having, and I'm just 100% present where I am, and I do the best show that I can possibly do. So yeah, it's an interesting relationship, and I think you just have to constantly be adjusting your mindset and checking in with yourself about how you feel, and kind of learning how to, I guess, accommodate and navigate those feelings in a professional workplace, just like you would in any other job. And that's and also, if you're in a job that was really toxic and you didn't like, you would quit that job, and that's okay too. But I think, we're all here because we love music and we want to be in the music industry. And if that is the case, then yes, it's those core things like your physical health, your mental health, your social well-being, because the industry that we work in it's a pretty strange world, and it's not always how the rest of the world works. So it's always good to keep that perspective as well. It's not the be all and the end all.
It's very true that there are a lot of like ebbs and flows in a music career, with like creativity and just even the phases that you go through. Jim, did you want to touch on that a little bit as well, and like when you've had creatives come through, what your advice would be to them when perhaps they have like creative block or they're not sure where to go next?
Sure, some of the other panellists have alluded to this, but haven't quite gone there. I'll call it out straight away. Music industry and the creative arts more broadly, people often fall into the trap of being defined by what other people think of them. You're really susceptible to reviews, to the opinions of people who aren't nearly as invested in your art form as you are. And if you fall into that trap of letting other people define your worth, that no good can come of it. People really need to be able to build their parameters, build the scaffolding that they need to protect themselves. I'm not a believer necessarily in any particular silver bullet for breaking through creative blocks. I think as individuals, everybody will have quite individualised solutions. For some people, it might be going camping for a weekend and just immersing themselves in nature and leaving it all behind. For others, it might be picking up a different set of creative outputs. For some, it might just be pushing through and just keeping on going. But yeah, like anytime you've been on a tour, you're in the aeroplane. The first thing that the staff in the aeroplane say to you is, if there's an emergency and the face masks fall down, look after yourself before you look after anybody else. That would be my biggest piece of advice. In our work at Arts Wellbeing Collective, we use a framework for mental health and wellbeing. It's called Me, We, Us. So the first people we need to look after is ourselves. But then we also need to make sure that all of our colleagues, whether they're on stage with us, whether they're in the scaffolding that we as performers can see them but nobody else can see them, or the people in marketing, we just need to check in on each other and genuinely listen, because everybody's got different stuff going on in their lives. Save myself from expletive there. And then the us bit, like I alluded to earlier, is the work that we do with managers and leaders. But yeah, keep on reviewing, keep on exploring yourself and seeing what your motivations are. And I think the best creative work I see from musicians and people in other creative fields is the honesty that is invested in their creative output. You can tell when people are bluffing it. Like, everybody's seen bad artists that, and they don't last long. So.
Thank you. Amazing. Thank you, Jim. Eilish, I want to ask you, you've spoken about the idea that you and you alone are the person who lives and breathes the art you make. Why do you believe that this is important for artists to remember throughout the highs and lows of their career?
Well, I feel very passionately about this because I think when my career really started to take off around 2018, 2019, I went through a process of being wooed by industry professionals. I, was added to Triple J, the email went out, and then as soon as the email with the auditions list went out, I just got like this barrage of, quite frankly, men being like, oh, do you have any demos I could listen to? I work at so-and-so, and I would be really interested. Like, oh, I'm an agent from XYZ, like, blah, blah, blah. And I like to think of it as like everybody had just piled into my bedroom. And I had been alone in my bedroom for years by that point. And then I just had this huge, overwhelming stream of people who were a lot older than me, a lot more savvy, and a lot less naive than I was. I didn't think I was at that time, but I really was. Just kind of came in and they were all kind of like tapping on my shoulder, pulling at my arm kind of thing. And it was nice to have such a busy room. And it was nice to be the center of attention with all these people that I thought were very important. They weren't. I thought they were. So I think the issue with that is that these people, and again, I don't want to be negative. I don't want you to take away negative vibes from this. I just think, a lot of the people that will approach you at times of great momentum in your career are only approaching you because it is a time of great momentum in your career. And I didn't really know that. So I had people kind of like coming up to me, blah, blah, blah. And I signed on with a couple of people who I believed in good faith were kind of in it for the long haul. They kind of told me all the right things. They were like, Eilish, your career is going to be a slow burn. Like, we're in it, blah, blah, blah. And long story short, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was dumped by these people. And it was a huge shock. And it was a massive blow to my ego, my sense of self, my self-worth, my idea of how good of a musician I was, how good of a person I was, because that's what happens when you intertwine music as your sole identity piece as a person. You believe that any failure that you suffer through in your music career is a personal failing, and it means that you're bad. And that's not true. So, long story short, that room that was once very busy was now empty again. And it was just me. And all of these people who said, we're in it for the long haul, like, don't you worry, we're so committed to this, they were gone. Like, poof of dust. And what I was left with was myself. And after a little bit of like self-soothing, which again, something that I think is a very, very important tool to have as an artist in this industry, or as anyone who works in this industry, is the ability to self-soothe. You're going to be on the road. There's going to be times where like no one will understand why you're upset about something and why it's hurt so badly, and you are going to have to be the one to pick yourself up off the floor. And I had to do that. Like, I had a great support network. My parents were amazing. Living with my parents, had no money. So it was just like, at the end of the day, it was this huge ego death. But then I started to enjoy the silence of my bedroom. And I started to create again. And I started to trust myself again and be like, no, I am good. This wasn't a personal failing. This was just the industry. And that's just what it is. Like, whatever. The ability to say whatever took me like 10 years to master, but God, it is a powerful thing. If you read a comment, and like you were saying, like if you read a mean comment or a review that doesn't understand your work or value it, or, the Triple J text line can be bloody brutal. Just the power that, whatever, holds is like cosmic, okay? So, and oftentimes these things, if you just start saying it, even if you don't fully believe it, it can kind of develop into something that actually works. So, yeah, I guess like you are alone at the end of it, really. You're the one sitting at the computer or the piano or I don't know, whatever you play. And that's good. That's a good thing because you're really powerful. And I am glad that I had that experience because it made me really strong and really resilient. And you'll probably go through something similar, like, maybe not quite as bad, maybe it'll be worse, maybe you won't, maybe you'll have a blessed path in this industry. But I just think like it's good news and it's bad news, which means that it's neutral news. You're alone, but that's okay. Whatever.
Amazing. That's great insight. Thank you, Eilish. I think we have time for a couple more questions. And if anyone wants to send them through the QR code, that's just up around the room. One of the last ones I want to ask, to you, Moju, you had your Rolling Stone Australia interview. And in that interview, you mentioned how you always want your work to firstly be for us, for people who look like me and feel like me. When was this intention set? And also, like, what's the importance of having your community around you and throughout your career?
I think I went into my solo career, like after being in bands and doing all of that, when I first broke away into my own solo careers, which I released my first solo record in 2012, I think. So I knew then that I had already had a little bit of a taste of the music industry, and I knew that, and I had been told point blank and outright that I was confronting that, there wasn't really very many people that looked like me. And I know this is something that a lot of people are now saying out in the world, but I guess for me, yeah, it's a very true thing. I grew up, watching in an era where music videos were like it, and we watched, MTV, Channel V, like all of that, Rage. I also grew up in a place, so it was like a time and a place, regional New South Wales, as a, third gender, third culture, mixed race, queer kid, in the, 80s and 90s, and there wasn't anyone really. Like I looked at people like Prince, who were, kind of, he was really gender non-conforming in a lot of ways, and yeah, a black man in high heels. Like, wow, that to me was like, as much as I had to kind of relate to that, there wasn't a lot. And so I kind of knew that I was always, sort of tentatively at first, sort of speaking about, my own experience, and I was always unafraid to present myself how I felt. And, at different times I was more kind of overt and pointed about speaking about my identity. There were other times where I was like, it was quite subtle. Like, people didn't necessarily get it, but I didn't feel like I had to be hitting anyone over the head with a hammer. Everybody, like I just was visibly this, and this was different at the time. There wasn't, and now, thankfully, I feel like I stand out way less than I did, 10, 20 years ago. There's so many more people like myself out in the world, kind of being who they are. So yeah, it's always informed my music, because, it's with me. I carry who I am into any and every situation. I can't separate myself from being a queer person, or being being Wiradjuri, or being Filipino. I can't. It is all of these things, all these intersecting things make up who I am, and so it's forever been in my music, whether you feel like it is or not. And really specifically in 2018, I released an album called Native Tongue that kind of thrust me into the center of a conversation around identity politics that was a bit of a zeitgeist moment, and I had no intention of being in that conversation. That's not what that record was about. I wasn't trying to harness this global movement. I was actually just honoring my grandparents and speaking about my experience in the world. And truly, I didn't think as many people were going to hear it as they did. But the song and the video went viral, and all of a sudden, I was this talking point. And I would say 90% of what came at me was really positive, but 10% of it was horrific. And it was extremely ugly. And for some reason, that stuff is 100 times louder than the 90% that's good. So I had to really learn very quickly how to protect myself from that. As well, just like Eilish said, all of a sudden, in a career where I had not just like defiantly been myself, but it was almost like, and it wasn't just despite these people that were now coming to me and offering, we've always thought you were amazing. We always knew that you were fantastic. We're so, like, who is managing you now? And it's like, full well I've been self-managed for majority of my career, but it was like all these people trying to like jump on board this thing. And, there was this, I guess I'd been at it long enough that I was cynical. And so I was a little suspicious, a little wary. But, I tried some stuff out, and some of it didn't work. Some of it did, some of it didn't. But yeah, I had a lot of people kind of coming at me, sort of trying to ride that wave. And I had to be really careful about protecting this thing that I'd built for myself. And sort of be able to recognize what was exploitative, and so I had a really steep learning curve through that. But the thing that I guess I've maintained through all of my career is that I've always been true to myself. I feel like there was maybe once or twice, like I've tried stuff out, and because I got caught in the whole trap of like wanting to make something that was marketable, or and it just fell flat. It just was it didn't feel right. I couldn't perform it live. It was like, this is not who I am. And so the music that I've made, not just like this, who I am, that is, people have struggled to figure out how to market. It doesn't matter. I've had a successful career. I've done it, not just despite them, but like at times in spite of them. I've done it, and it's been successful because I've always been honest and truthful. Like, I've been true to who I am, and I've been true to the art that I want to make, and I've been honest with my audience, and they know that. And they've stayed with me through my journey, no matter how many times I've changed my sound and style, which I love to do. That's a whole, it's what keeps me invested in what I do creatively is that I get to experiment all the time. I get to come at it with something new every single time. I get to try things on and like, you know, this is a trouble that I find sometimes with certain, I guess, parts of, specifically in Australian music industry, that will have like that have led to, I think, the homogenization of a lot of music that gets made here, because people are constantly trying to, well, I want to get on that, you know, I want to get played on Triple J, I want to play at that festival, I want to play at Splendor, I want to do this, and it's like, you know, that gets you there, and how long does that last? But if you really want to have longevity in your career, you have to be doing something that's different, and that might take a little while to stick, that might take a while to catch, but you got to be honest, you got to be true to who you are, you got to be true to your art, and that will carry you a lot further than trying to play the popularity game, I think. And everyone's career trajectory looks different. I'm not saying that mine is the right way or whatever, but I'm just saying, you know, that's how it worked for me. And so at the end of the day, whether it worked or it didn't work, or you know, this record's successful and that one wasn't, it's like, it doesn't actually matter, because the only measure of success is whether or not I feel like I achieved what I wanted to do creatively. And maybe, you know, there's a lot of privilege in being able to say that, because I do have a career, but I fought for that and I worked for it and I worked really hard. So, yeah, I think, you know, all the things that you said again, Eilish, I fully, you know, you articulated that so well, but yeah, I really relate to all of that. And yeah, for me, that's the thing that I have to say to you. Like, community, those people will come to you, they will be around you, they'll support you if they know that you're being true and honest with them. And at the end of the day, that's the most valuable thing that you can offer with your art.
Amazing. I think that's a really lovely point to kind of wrap up on. And was there anything else, Jim or Eilish, you'd like to kind of add on the end of that? Just related to that. Yeah.
I did quickly have time to look up that number. So it's 1-800-959-500.
For Support Act.
Support Act helpline. It's there all the time for everybody that needs a little bit of help.
Brilliant.
I actually do have like one thing, and this will take like 1 second.
Yeah.
Sustaining your music career, very important for yourself. I know I just wanted a whole thing about how it's all you. That is true, but also the people in your circle, try to look after them as best you can. One of my, like, and I'm not here being like, I'm so amazing, but like one of the things that I find to be very valuable is if you have a session musician in your, you know, on your payroll or whatever, please try and pay them like within your means as best you can. Treat them as best you can. If there is an opportunity and you're going on tour and there's an opportunity to have separate rooms, like pay the extra. If you can afford it, pay the extra for the extra room, because every time I've done that, I know like all of my session musicians have always been my friends. And quite literally all I want to do is look after my friends. And if we undercut each other, that just makes it worse for the industry. And I know that we're all kind of like, you know, we're all penny pinching. I know that. But as best you can, try and look after the people that work with you, and like hope, I guess, that the people that you work for will also have that same mindset. I think, yeah, change really starts from you, and then you hope that it catches on. So, yeah.
Amazing. Wonderful. I think that was such a lovely discussion. Thank you, Eilish, Mojo and Jim. Really important perspectives for people starting or continuing their music career. We're going to have, a bit of a break now and then a performance from Moni. So, just a little round of applause. Thank you.